How can the smallest guy in Bikini Bottom fund some of the biggest schemes? I mean, Plankton is a walking contradiction. He's the owner of the Chum Bucket, a restaurant so unpopular it makes tumbleweeds look busy. Yet somehow he can afford giant robots, state-of-the-art gadgets, and a wife who's literally a supercomputer.
He's making more money than ever!
That's because, unlike you, he's a good businessman.
How does that math add up? I think we're missing something. Probably the possibility that the Chum Bucket is not his only source of income. I mean, he might not be the failing businessman you believe he is. In fact, he might even be making millions of dollars each year without you noticing. Obviously, we're gonna start with his primary source of income, which is the Chum Bucket, or let's say it's basically Bikini Bottom's black hole for fast food. On an average day, it's lucky to have a single customer. Most of the time, it's SpongeBob who willingly walks in the Chum Bucket, and even then, it's usually because of some convoluted scheme. Statistically speaking, the Chum Bucket's daily revenue could be zero. And yet, the place keeps running. Plankton's got all the trappings of a functioning business: a physical location, employees, well, Karen, and an endless supply of chum-based products. Let's estimate his operating costs. Rent on prime underwater real estate could run anywhere from $500 to $2,000 a month. Utilities like water and electricity might add another $300, and then there's inventory. If you think the rent is high, don't forget that it is on the other side of the road to the Krusty Krab. Now, I know chum isn't exactly filet mignon, but processing and storing all those rotting fish parts has to cost something. Let's say $1,000 a month? Now, factor in his other expenses. How much does a giant robot cost? A low-end model might run $50,000, but Plankton's machines? They shoot lasers, fly, and sometimes transform. That's at least 6 figures per bot. And then there's his beloved wife, Karen. A sentient computer with sarcasm installed? Easily $1 million build. So how is Plankton funding all this while serving chum that not even Plankton eat? The obvious answer is that the Chum Bucket isn't actually his main source of income. In fact, calling it a business feels generous. It's more like a hobby, or better yet, a front. But for what? That's where things get juicy. Plankton has other streams of revenue, ones you never see. I mean, maybe he's secretly running a tech empire or selling gadgets to Bikini Bottom's government. Think about it, for someone who claims to be broke and down on his luck, Plankton sure has a suspiciously luxurious lifestyle. He has access to technology that rivals anything you'd find in Silicon Valley, and he's funding elaborate schemes with zero return on investment. Karen alone is decades ahead of her time. What if Plankton patented her design? He could rake in billions. For comparison, in the real world, advanced AI systems like ChatGPT or autonomous robots can generate tens of billions of dollars in market value. Let's estimate Karen's worth at a conservative $10 billion based on her capabilities. Even if Plankton sold licenses for scaled-down versions of Karen's tech, he could pull in $100 million annually from contracts with governments or private corporations. Or maybe Plankton's wife Karen is more than just a snarky AI. Maybe she's a financial genius. With her computational abilities, she could be dominating Bikini Bottom's stock market, trading currency, or even creating underwater Bitcoin. If she's managing a virtual portfolio worth $500 million and assuming a 10% annual return, that's $50 million a year in passive income. And that's before we consider the possibility of her running arbitrage strategies or high-frequency trading algorithms, which could add millions more to the mix. I like to believe that Plankton is a patent troll. If he's licensing his designs to other companies while suing anyone who infringes on his patents, he could be making an additional $10 to $20 million annually in royalties and settlements. Karen could easily manage a portfolio of patents, raking in cash without anyone in Bikini Bottom suspecting a thing. It's stealth wealth at its finest. And it's also possible that Plankton has a secret side hustle as a tech mogul. Sure, Sandy Cheeks is brilliant and inventive, but her focus is more on scientific exploration and survival tech. Plankton, on the other hand, is building robots, laser cannons, and mind control devices seemingly designed for profit or domination. The sheer variety and sophistication of his inventions suggests someone who's not just tinkering, but monetizing his ideas. The idea is that he sells his inventions on the black market or directly to governments. Well, Bikini Bottom does seem like the kind of place that might have an underwater military budget. Let's assume one laser-equipped robot sells for $5 million. If Plankton manages to sell just 10 units a year, that's $50 million in revenue. Add another $20 million for small gadgets or devices, and you're looking at $70 million annually from weapon sales alone. If this theory holds water, it would explain how Plankton funds his wild schemes. The Chum Bucket might be nothing more than a passion project, a quirky distraction from his real moneymaker. It's like a billionaire who owns a struggling cupcake shop just because they love baking. Except in Plankton's case, the cupcakes are chum and the billionaire is also trying to steal a burger recipe. But it gets even weirder. What if the restaurant is actually a cover for something much darker, like smuggling, espionage, or even weapon manufacturing? Sure, it's a bit far-fetched, but isn't that what makes it fun? And the wildest idea I have in my mind is that he is secretly rich. The Chum Bucket is just a passion project. But what about all his whining about being broke? Well, it could be a cover to throw everyone off his trail. I mean, we all have that friend who acts broke but is secretly a millionaire. I want you to tag that friend below and tell them that they and Plankton have some similarities. This idea gains traction when you consider how much Plankton spends on his schemes. No one struggling to pay the bills is blowing their budget on planning elaborate and highly expensive schemes to get their hands on a secret recipe. But again, none of these theories can be proven, but they do explain one thing. Plankton's wealth, or lack of it, may not be tied to his restaurant at all. Instead, it's his relentless drive to prove himself that keeps him going, no matter the cost. And when it comes to Plankton, not all interpretations are lighthearted or quirky. One particularly provocative theory suggests that Plankton's failures aren't accidental, they're deliberate. The idea here is that the writers use Plankton as a critique of capitalism, portraying him as the inevitable downfall of corporate greed. Despite his genius and endless resources, he's stuck in an endless cycle of failure because he refuses to adapt or take responsibility for his shortcomings. His fixation on stealing the Krabby Patty formula rather than innovating or creating something original serves as a metaphor for businesses that thrive on imitation rather than creativity. But not everyone buys into this critique. We can even argue that Plankton represents the underdog crushed by the system, a lone entrepreneur doomed to fail because the odds are stacked against him. Mr. Krabs becomes the real villain in this interpretation. Plankton's endless failures are seen as less about his own flaws and more about the impossibility of competing against an entrenched corporate giant. And we can also view his constant reliance on gadgets and AI as a commentary on the dangers of technological overreach. In this view, Plankton's downfall is about losing touch with the human, or fishy element, of business. Unlike Mr. Krabs, who relies on charm and tradition, Plankton's obsession with tech makes him cold and disconnected, leading to his perpetual lack of success. But what if Plankton's wealth ties directly back to the most logical part of all, his connection to the Krabby Patty itself? Let's tackle a question that will keep you up at night. If Plankton and Mr. Krabs were once business partners, why doesn't Plankton already have the secret recipe? They worked together to develop the perfect fast food recipe. They succeeded, but somewhere along the way, their friendship fell apart, and Mr. Krabs took sole ownership of the Krabby Patty formula. Plankton was left with nothing but bitterness and maybe a royalty check. Here's the backstory. They worked together to develop the perfect fast food recipe. They succeeded, but somewhere along the way, their friendship fell apart. Let's estimate the cost. Industrial scale R&D for fast food might run around $50,000 in real-world terms. When the partnership fell apart, Mr. Krabs walked away with the formula, leaving Plankton with nothing but bitterness and perhaps a small royalty check. This theory makes sense when you consider how personal Plankton's rivalry with Mr. Krabs feels. If Plankton did help invent the recipe, his obsession with stealing it might be less about money and more about reclaiming what he believes is rightfully his. But there's a twist. What if Plankton does know the formula, or at least part of it? The idea is that his contribution was the chum component of the recipe, which Mr. Krabs replaced with a secret ingredient after their partnership ended. If this is true, it would explain why Plankton is so fixated on unlocking the rest of the formula. Of course, there's another more practical reason Plankton might not already know the recipe. Mr. Krabs could have deliberately erased Plankton's knowledge of it. It's not impossible to imagine Mr. Krabs using some kind of memory-wiping device or maybe even tricking Plankton into forgetting. Let's be honest, this is Bikini Bottom, where logic takes a backseat to absurdity. Now, let's talk about the theory that will make you question everything. Plankton and Mr. Krabs are actually working together. Yep, you heard that right. What if the greatest rivalry in Bikini Bottom is nothing more than a carefully staged performance? Here's how it works. Mr. Krabs, being the money-hungry tycoon that he is, realizes early on that the best way to protect his profits is to scare off competition. And instead of being a real competitor, Plankton acts as a shill, creating the illusion of rivalry while ensuring that no one else dares enter the fast food market. If Mr. Krabs pays Plankton under the table, say $50,000 annually to maintain the charade, it would be a win-win scenario. For Mr. Krabs, it's a cheap investment to secure his monopoly and enhance the Krusty Krab's reputation. For Plankton, it's enough to fund his Chum Bucket operations and cover his over-the-top schemes. Think about it, if you're a potential entrepreneur in Bikini Bottom, what do you see? A powerful businessman, Mr. Krabs, and a tech-savvy genius, Plankton, locked in a brutal feud. You'd probably assume there's no room for your business to succeed, right? By keeping Plankton around as a threat, Mr. Krabs ensures that no legitimate competitors ever open shop. But it doesn't stop there. Plankton's antics, his over-the-top schemes, his ridiculous gadgets, and his constant failures serve another purpose. They make the Krusty Krab look unbeatable. Every time Plankton loses, it reinforces the idea that the Krabby Patty is untouchable. The most convincing evidence? Plankton never really tries to win. Sure, he builds robots and hatches elaborate plans, but they're always doomed from the start. Why doesn't he just hire someone to buy a Krabby Patty and reverse engineer it?
I don't understand why you don't just steal a Krabby Patty and all that confusion.
Or sneak into the Krusty Krab after hours, because that's not the point. His job isn't to succeed, it's to create the illusion of a rivalry. And what does Plankton get out of this deal? Easy. Mr. Krabs could be paying him under the table. Not a bad gig. Act like you're trying to steal a recipe, fail spectacularly, and collect a paycheck. Plus, Plankton gets to keep running the Chum Bucket without worrying about bankruptcy. This arrangement might be the actual secret formula Mr. Krabs is so desperate to protect. It's not about the ingredients in the Krabby Patty. Instead, it's about the strategy that keeps his monopoly intact. So, is Plankton a villain, a victim, or a business partner? The truth might be a little of all three. One thing's for sure, the next time you watch SpongeBob, you'll never look at the Krusty Krab versus Chum Bucket rivalry the same way again. Alright, let's start attaching numbers to his mysterious income streams. By this point, we have established that Plankton isn't just a struggling restaurateur. In fact, he could very well be the Elon Musk of Bikini Bottom, minus the Twitter obsession. The Chum Bucket is a financial disaster by any measure. With virtually no customers, daily revenue might be zero, yet the expenses keep piling up. Rent on prime real estate, $500 to $2,000 per month. Utilities, $300 per month. Inventory for Chum production, $1,000 per month. That's an annual operating cost of $21,600 to $39,600 just to keep the doors open. And this doesn't include maintenance or repairs, which are frequent thanks to Plankton's many explosions. But this isn't where Plankton's real money is going. His true expenses lie in his obsession with technology. Plankton's gadgets and robots are marvels of engineering and come with sky-high price tags. Giant robots with laser capabilities, $500,000 to $1 million each. Karen, his supercomputer wife, an initial build cost of $10 million to $20 million, with annual upgrades costing $2 million to $5 million. If Plankton builds one robot a year and maintains Karen's cutting-edge status, he's spending $12.5 million to $26 million annually just on tech. The question is, how does Plankton fund all of this? The answer lies in his secretive side hustles. Here's the final tally for Plankton's annual finances. Expenses: Chum Bucket, $21,600 to $39,600. Tech, $12.5 million to $26 million. Revenue: black market sales, $70 million. Patent licensing, $10 to $20 million. Karen's portfolio, $60 to $65 million. Collusion income, $50,000. Net annual profit, well, a staggering $113 million to $143 million, which makes Plankton one of the wealthiest residents of Bikini Bottom, if not the wealthiest. So despite his apparent failures, Plankton's finances tell a different story. But we're just scratching the surface of Bikini Bottom's economy. But what about the Krusty Krab? How much money does this restaurant make? Click the on-screen video to find out.